It is Sunday in South Carolina. We begin this week on Connect to the Capitol with the continuing saga, the chaos at the State Election Commission. That is former executive director there, Howard Knapp, in court Friday afternoon after being arrested on embezzlement charges, misconduct in office, using a public office for financial gain charges. All of that linked to something we've been talking about for weeks. He was fired a month ago. The reasons for his firing were somewhat mysterious. We're getting some clarity now on this Sunday morning. His bail set at $75,000 in that particular case. Dave Wilson and Catherine Glenn Foster are on the road this week up in the nation's capital, so we're getting connected to them as well. But we're finally getting some answers here about what's going on at the commission. We know that Knapp is out, and he was in jail on Friday.
He certainly was. So the judge, as you said, set the bail at $75,000, which shows us something about the seriousness of these charges. We're talking about misusing public office for one's own financial gain, embezzlement up to $10,000. We don't know. There could even be more charges coming as this investigation continues, as more begins to be uncovered. But we do know that the existing charges are certainly serious. And when you have someone in this position engaging in these behaviors, it really draws a lot into question, right? Because it no longer is just it's just a financial issue. It's just a political issue. It really brings into play questions of voter confidence, of the upper echelons of our political system, and what exactly is going on there when it comes to oversight and accountability.
And that's one of the big issues that came up, because when asked in an interview earlier this week, the chairman of the board said he had just thumbed through some of the paperwork that gave approval for the extra money that went towards the voting machines. Remember, they were supposed to cost $28 million. They came in at $32 million. So this is a question of oversight, as Catherine just said, that is going to be so vitally important when we start thinking about, are our elections secure? It asks the question, at least in some people's minds, whether or not this is or not. They keep saying that our elections are secure. The city of Columbia has elections coming up a week from this Tuesday. That is a place that we have to ask, where is the confidence? Because remember, SLED had been investigating this for well over a year before this indictment came down and he ended up in jail.
And the integrity of our elections, it really goes beyond the ballot box, although ballot boxes are most certainly implicated here with these 28 million, 32 million ballot boxes. But it really does extend to who's serving in office and what are they doing to ensure the integrity of elections. And right now, there are a lot of questions. We expect to get more answers through this court process, but right now, we just have the barest of facts. They're very concerning.
And that, Brian, is where we want to be able to have a level of surety. There's been a lot of restructuring of state government that's gone on over the last couple of decades. We saw a lot of it with our health departments over the last year getting consolidated. But we will most likely be hearing coming out of the legislature when they come back in January, what are we going to be doing about this? Because this is a level of oversight and responsibility that has to be answered. And right now, that's done with the State Election Commission. That's a group of citizens from South Carolina selected by the governor and members of the legislature to serve and provide that level of oversight. We're certainly going to be seeing oversight coming on the commission itself.
Yeah, you talk about oversight. Just a few days ago, before the arrest of Howard Knapp, the board met, the Election Commission board met again, and they asked that question in an open meeting. They don't know what happened to that difference, that $4 million plus between the $28 million contract that was approved and the ultimately almost $33 million that was spent. They don't know where it went. So I'm hoping somebody does, because we've had a lot of missing money in this state this year.
$4 million is a lot of money, especially in an economy right now where we're going to be talking about this a little bit later, where SNAP benefits are being reduced. We've got a question as to whether or not people are going to be able to do something as simple as to pay the rent, pay the electricity bill, have enough money for food. We're not trying to be throwing up too many red flags right now. But this is an important responsibility that a commission has in providing a level of, let us look at the books. Let us see exactly what's being done. Let's read the director's report. Let's ask the questions that need to be asked. That's the responsibility of that board that oversees the elections. And we should see that in every single department in state government.
That's right. And let's just talk about the charges here. The charges and that difference in the cost of those voting machines, those ballot boxes. So there is a huge gap between less than $10,000 of embezzlement and that $4 million difference. And that is another one of those questions that has yet to be answered. We are expecting to learn a lot more about that as this saga continues, but in the meantime, we are left with a lot of questions.
And we know right now that the $10,000, less than $10,000, is most likely, because we have seen this in other reports, the use of a state vehicle, the state credit card for purchasing gas and things along those lines that go beyond the responsibilities of the job. But it has been abundantly clear. SLED went after this. Law enforcement has seen this, and they're calling it to task. That's an important role and responsibility that they have.
And it goes well beyond that voter data question that we were initially discussing when this first came up.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think that's even a question that's part of this right now. Also worth noting before we end this segment too, that the second in command, the deputy director, Paige Solange, also arrested and faced a wiretapping charge for placing or being accused of replacing a recording device in an executive session of the commission board when they were discussing matters related to Howard Knapp. So both of them facing charges on Friday and in front of a judge. We're going to wrap up this segment now. And speaking of money, my friends, those nuclear reactors that were never finished, that were walked away from, that cost this state $9 billion. Apparently, they're going to get back online, or online, not get back online, but online. We're going to talk about the VC Summer Nuclear Project coming up and what the Senate has to say about that. So when we return on Connect to the Capitol. Welcome back to Connect to the Capitol. We're talking nuclear power. This is video from Jenkinsville, the VC Summer site. You remember this. This video is almost a decade old. 2 nuclear reactors there were being built during that period of time. And you remember in 2017, they were simply abandoned. Santee Cooper, SCE&G at the time were part of this. 4,000 jobs down the drain just like that. And more than $9 billion paid from the state here and also customers. Now Santee Cooper's reviving the project. That's where we begin this next segment. On Friday, the Santee Cooper board meeting, drawing up and approving a memorandum to an investment group, Brookfield Assets, who can take on some financial responsibility here and maybe get these things finished. What the timeline looks like remains to be seen. But this was a scandal almost a decade ago. People went to prison over this, and all that money spent and no power yet.
No electricity.
No electricity at all. As a matter of fact, you're feeling it right now on your electricity bill. If you were then at the time with SCE&G, because they became part of Dominion, as part of that deal, your bill went up anywhere from $20 to $30 a month to be able to pay for that expense. That's an important thing to remember here, because that expense not only was absorbed in one way, it was definitely absorbed by the consumer and will be for the next couple of decades.
That's right. We have a lot of questions that remain to be answered here. Will this new fund truly shield taxpayers from future costs? How will transparency and accountability really be achieved here? This could be, however, the real redemption of this site.
Redemption would be great if it came with a refund, though.
Yes.
If the refund would actually come back to consumers so that when we get our electricity bill in, we can look at that and go, oh, wow, it's actually gone down because we're not paying for somebody's absolute mismanagement of that particular project. Now, keep in mind, this is VC Summer 2 and 3. There's already a nuclear reactor at this site. It's been operating for decades. So they were building 2 more because that's a great, clean, despite the the misnomers that you hear sometimes about nuclear power. It's one of the cleanest forms of energy, and it was going to be a solution to meet the growing energy demands, which we have talked about. We talked about that from the University of South Carolina. We talked about that with Speaker of the House, Merle Smith. The state legislature right now is recognizing we have major energy demands. And a lot of that stuff right now, Brian, is coming from these data centers that are coming into South Carolina. Great to have companies like Google and Microsoft and Amazon in South Carolina. But those particular data centers take a lot of electricity.
They certainly do. So we have the data centers. We also have a lot of power needs with the university, with schools, with research labs, a lot of other organizations that are definitely power heavy users. And that, again, is filtering down to the public. We want to make sure that there is enough electricity for all. So this could be a solution. This could be a way to get us there. But as you said, Dave, I would love to see a rebate both for the state and on our own electricity bills.
So the question is now in this, who is responsible for the money, and will any money be coming back? There had been talk, Brian, about whether there would be private investment coming in from Google or Microsoft or Amazon or some of these larger companies. But this investment group that's coming in and basically buying this debt is basically a hedge fund that these companies can now put their investment dollars into and perhaps even see some level of a return once that power generation gets going again. Or actually gets going.
Exactly.
Yeah, a significant development. We talked at great length during the legislative session, too, about how the General Assembly was trying to address the growing energy needs of this state. So this won't be done overnight. But if and when it is accomplished, we're talking about decades worth of power generation.
We're talking well over 100 years of power generations that's supposed to be expected off of these. And the amount of energy that would be produced makes South Carolina an energy exporter to other regions other states across the Southeast region. 25% of the electricity in South Carolina is nuclear power, because there's nuclear power here. There's some up in the upstate in Oconee County. So we are ahead of the game when it comes to that level of what is considered green energy. And yet at the same time, we're also paying because of a lot of mismanagement from some of the energy companies that really didn't manage this project well from the get-go.
And yet we are a state that is known for growth. We're known for growth in our population, with so many families moving into the state, growth in terms of industry, research, data centers, all of these different things that we talk about week after week, Sunday morning after Sunday morning. This is a way to provide that foundation, that infrastructure that will help us maintain that position in the Southeast and really nationwide, known throughout the world for decades to come.
Yeah.
All right, so another wait and see topic here on Connect to the Capitol. But the wheels are in motion, and that'll get some power generation in motion at some point. They were talking about as early as the next 4 or 5 years in that board meeting today. So we'll see. Maybe it could be sooner. Maybe it could be sooner, because we know we need it here in South Carolina. All right, when we come back, we're talking judicial reform. Doge SC. We've talked about them before. They have some plans that are actually being backed by some heavy hitters at the State House. That's when we come back. Welcome back to Connect to the Capitol. We're talking judicial reform, the way that judges are selected in this state. Right now, the lawmakers do it. Very little oversight on that as well. That little group we've been talking about many times over the course of this year, though, Doge SC, is backing some legislation right now that would take this on. And a sponsor of that bill is the House Speaker himself, Merle Smith. So that is a prominent voice, Dave Wilson and Catherine Glenn Foster, that this could get some traction. And that group, Doge SC, backed by a wealthy man in the Lowcountry, is pushing some things at the State House. Not surprised.
And this makes sense, really, because South Carolina is one of only a couple of states with this system that we have set up with our lawmakers, often lawyers, legislator lawyers, who are selecting our judges, who are selecting the very bench that they go before. So that raises a lot of questions here about transparency, about accountability, the same questions that we ask, it feels like, every segment, every week. But that's kind of our job here. When it comes to what happens when these lawmakers, who are also lawyers, go before the very judges who they put onto the bench, how do we ensure that that ethics are being followed? How do we ensure that that our lawmaking process and our legislative process and our judicial process are all fair?
We are recognizing right now that this is not a new topic that is coming before the legislature. What we're hearing right now, though, is you've got somebody who's got a lot of money with Ron Reddy, who is going through using Doge SC to deal with an issue that honestly he personally dealt with because he had to deal with some issues along the coast on his home that's on the beach, that he had a seawall up. And he got some really bad rap from DHEC at the time and the Administrative Law Court, wondering how in the world can I protect my property and have a judicial system that is fair when I'm also dealing with legislators who are coming out on this issue as well. When you have that, it really puts some oomph behind this, for lack of a better phrase, because Reddy's putting his money where his mouth is, and has actually gotten, when you have both Merle Smith and Alan Wilson both coming out on this, here's the thing, if the Speaker of the House puts his name as a sponsor of a bill, you can almost guarantee it's going to make it through all the way through the House. Whether or not it will finish in the Senate is the real question, because we only have about 5 months of the legislative session, about 18 weeks total, for them to deal with a lot of things. And judicial reform is going to be one I can guarantee you is going to take a lot of time.
That's right. Now, what we're talking about here is really the renewed urgency, the renewed impetus to get this through, backed by someone with a lot of personal interest. But it's an issue that really we have faced for a long time, that even the governor has addressed repeatedly. And I think the question is really whether this will go far enough in reform. Will it give the right amount of power, of authority to the right individuals to make sure that we get judges elected fairly, and that our lawmakers are, who also serve as lawyers, are able to really do their jobs effectively and ethically as they go before the bench.
Right. And it is also going to be the question about whether or not there's going to be more of a voice of the governor coming in on this, because unlike federal judges, the governor doesn't get to appoint and then the Senate or the House or a combined General Assembly make a decision on this. This is, people are putting themselves up. It goes through a review process, and then it's just a vote of the legislature. And that's all. And
that's all is right. So we'll see in January if this gets some traction, and it probably will. Quickly, we got about a minute left in this segment. We've talked about another issue, too, that has to do with lawmakers. They gave themselves a raise in the state budget. That was challenged, though, by one of their own, the state Supreme Court, taking on that case this week. And no official opinion's been issued, but they had some words of advice about how they could maybe have worded this better. So still, as of right now, the lawmakers aren't getting paid.
That's right. So right now, what the Supreme Court is essentially indicating is if the fund had simply been termed differently, if it had been given a different label, then it would have changed everything.
Right. If it had been labeled as legislative expenses or something other than compensation, that would have made it constitutional, because legislators cannot raise their own pay during the current legislative session. By giving themselves an extra $1,500 a month in what they term district expenses, it's what it used to be called, then that was how they dealt with things that they have to do during the off season of the legislature, keeping in mind that they're only paid $10,500 a year for 18 weeks of the legislative session, plus all of the other meetings that go on. And if you're a state elected official, guess what? you're a state elected official 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, not just when you're in Columbia.
Really all year long. So some of the solutions that the Supreme Court offered would have been call it something else, call it a reimbursement fund as opposed to compensation, have the effect delayed so that it wouldn't go into effect during this session. A lot of different options here, but this option may not have been constitutional.
And here's the thing about that. The person who is leading this charge is Senator Wes Clymer out of York County. Guess what? He's running for the 5th congressional district seat that Ralph Norman's giving up to run for governor. And who did he get to choose to help him with that? His Democratic former counterpart who gave up his seat to the area in Charleston, our good friend Dick Harpootlian.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Catherine. We're going to move on to our next segment here when we come back on Connect to the Capitol. We are talking about elections and who is going to go to that state house that we just saw right there. Some special elections to talk about when we wrap things up. As we close things out here on Connect to the Capitol, a special election to fill the seat of now former and disgraced lawmaker R.J. May, who we know is involved in that child porn case and will be sentenced to federal prison here in a few months. Special election the other day to pick a Republican primary winner. They didn't get one. It's headed to a runoff November the 4th. John Lastinger getting 40% of the vote. Brian Duncan 37% of the vote. The runoff's on November 4th. The winner will face the Democrat Chuck Hightower. There's a couple of these, Dave and Catherine, that we have special elections here. Another one to fill the seat of Bobby Cox. Steve Nail, that's in Senate District 12. Steve Nail getting 38%. Diane Mitchell 36%. A runoff there as well. That's set for November 4th. And here's one that we want to talk about a little bit. Lee Bright, a blast from the past, barely won a special election up there for his old Senate seat.
You got Lee Bright, who turned around and won 50.9%. He only needed 50% plus one vote to win. So he's heading back, and he is had been considered one of the further right members. The question is whether or not he's going to come back and be considered one of the normal Republican senators or not, because there has been such a shift to the right by the Republican Party and especially with the new members that have come in this last session.
Yeah, Lee was very outspoken during his previous time. That's being kind, outspoken. We'll leave it at that, right? Is that maybe the best way to say it? So we'll see what he does to the Senate. All right, one critical item before we get out of here about SNAP benefits. Here in South Carolina, because of the federal government shutdown, right now, social services being advised to put SNAP benefits on hold next month in November. Dave and Catherine, this will put a tremendous burden on more than 500,000 people in this state almost, or close to it.
Yes, 260,000 families relying on SNAP plus. Starting in November, may not get those benefits anymore if this government shutdown continues. And based on what we're seeing and hearing up here, it is likely to continue. This could be devastating for South Carolina families who really need these SNAP funds to make their food budgets work.
And it also is going to affect what happens in your schools as well. Some school districts are already sending out right now notifications that there will not be benefits for those students to be able to pay for lunches. So that's something that families are going to have to take into account. Be looking in your mail. If you've got a student in a school in South Carolina, if you're on SNAP benefits, you're going to probably need to be preparing for some tough decisions that are going to have to be made about school lunches.
Yeah, this is, and again, the holidays will be coming there in November as well. But this is kind of a until further notice thing with the SNAP benefits. So I know a lot of people, as you said, 280,000 families are watching this closely. And of course, we'll be paying attention to it as well. Dave, Catherine, thank you again, as always. You are in the Capitol. We're in this Capitol. That is going to do it this week for Connect to the Capitol. We'll see you next Sunday.